This final presentation in Module 2 is about the late 10th to early 11th century Frankish epic, The Song of Roland. Although the date of composition of this poem is clearly within the period we refer to as the High Middle Ages, the events described date to what many see as the very end of the era of the Dark Ages in the 8th century. So we have to acknowledge that distance between the events described and the telling of those events. This presentation follows the others in presenting material that is worthwhile to pause over and review, so please, as always, watch and pause with that goal in mind. The poem itself stands out for both its chivalric and knightly detail, and also in the gruesome violence it depicts in portraying the conflict between Charlemagne's Frankish mounted armies and the Saracen forces who harass them as they retreat from the Battle of Roncesvalles on the border of the Pyrenees mountain range between France and Spain. The hero and namesake of the poem's title, the figure of Roland, is presented as a model for chivalric duty and comportment, and his death, realized in an act of selfless sacrifice in service to his retreating army, is portrayed as a tragedy of no small measure, as the death not just of a devoted warrior, but also an established system of chivalric values that is shown to erode as the story unfolds. The events of this 8th century battle were updated by the 11th century poet to suit an increasingly popular ideology of crusading, itself reliant on fomenting intense discord and hatred between Christians and Muslims. In portraying Roland's selfless sacrifice, the poem speaks to a number of themes connected with both a chivalric ethos and a crusading ideology. Those themes include loyalty, duty, courage, and faith. Significantly, Roland's major conflict isn't with one of his opponents in battle, as in fact there are plenty of notes of admiration sounded by the poet toward the Saracen forces, but rather with one from within his own rank and number, his stepfather Ganelon, whose more questionable values clash with those of the dutiful Roland. Please take a moment to review this slide, which provides some context for understanding that conflict. Bound as he is to Charlemagne's cause by loyalty and duty, and by his chivalric ethos, Roland is a model of sacrifice and knightly comportment. His central conflict isn't with the Saracens, his Islamic battle opponents, but rather with his stepfather Ganelon, whose duplicity towards Roland and Charlemagne eventually becomes evident. The poet signals his respect for both Charlemagne's forces and also for their Saracen opponents, whose pagan faith he seems to regard as something of a tragic accident. The treachery of the main villain, Ganelon, is revealed gradually as the retreat unfolds and the plot progresses. Their deep hostility is revealed gradually as the poem unfolds. But one interesting detail is that Ganelon gives voice to the other fatigued and battle-weary Frankish warriors who yearn to return to their homeland after many years away. It also turns out that a monetary debt has unsettled the relations between Roland and Ganelon, and in this context, monetary obligations are presented as something that destabilizes the codes of loyalty and duty required by the chivalric ethos which binds the knights to their lord Charlemagne. This slide discusses other aspects of Ganelon's character that highlight his status as the poem's central villain, so please pause and review as you are able to. Of course, the poem's main message is one of support for engaging in conflict with the infidel and all of the sacrifices and conditions of faith that effort requires. Situated somewhere within the middle 10th and early 11th centuries, the poem fits within the crusading ethos of the time and so depicts not just a struggle between cultures, but also one between systems of faith. Within that context, the violence against the infidel is justified, and the poem clearly represents the sentiments of its time, offering a message of violence justified against infidels and opponents to Christianity. Again, please pause and review as you see fit. Beyond its fixation on knights, armor, swords, and other forms of weaponry, the poem is also distinguished by its intense depictions of violence. In that sense, it aligns with the epic works of Homer and Virgil, and also the Anglo-Saxon epic Beowulf. All are epic depictions of warriors in battle who struggle to preserve not only just their own heroic codes of conduct, but also the values that define their society. Within those depictions, the poem underscores the themes of duty, obedience, and sacrifice, values without which the knightly ethos and crusading ideology of the 11th and early 12th centuries would collapse. Once again, I'll ask you to review the points made on this slide, and as always, I thank you for your attention.